The scene opens with a shot of the sun blazing overhead and a stack of scrolls falling into frame, completely overtaking the composition. We crossfade to a medium shot of Ramses as he declares his plans for restoring the temple he destroyed earlier in the film. As the camera trucks back to reveal his surroundings, a frame within a frame emerges, separating and defining Ramses from his servants. Within the composition, there are many angles that converge on Ramses' head, which, along with the low angle, reinforce his powerful status within the shot. From here we jump cut to an extreme long shot where two long rows of slaves are revealed to be transporting the mountain of sand that is piled at the feet of the statue of the pharaoh Seti. The rows of slaves lead the eye back to the base of the statue, along with the top of the columns that lead to the statue's knees. The rows of pillars are angled back slightly, keeping the eye in the bottom third of the composition where the slaves are most prominent. The statue is giant in the frame, but far away. Its largeness suggests his power over the slaves, but it is the slaves who are the focus of the shot. Moses enters from screen right, occupying the entirety of the right third of the shot. This allows the audience to see his body language in reaction to the slaves, of whom he has just discovered he was born among. We cut to another long shot profile of Moses walking through them to reach Ramses. As slaves continue to move past him in the background, Moses is framed by a slave and a slave handler. We cannot see their faces, but the handler lashes the man as Moses passes. He is very small in the frame. The two figures in the foreground occupy most of the space. Moses, the prince, is not important in this composition, but what is happening to the slave is. We cut to a medium shot of Moses turning to look at what is happening to him. We cut back to the handler and the slaves, where once again the slaves are positioned much larger in the frame, taking up a full half, and the handler appears comparatively small. We come back to Moses, a bit tighter than the shot before, where we can see his reaction. A slave enters screen left and crosses in front of him, Moses stepping back to allow him to occupy the majority of the screen as he passes, followed by another slave. In the background, Ramses is framed on the hill by his station, separated. The lines of the mound he and his company sit upon and the mountain of sand converge behind Moses' back, giving his head and face room to be seen reacting. We cut to a frontal medium shot of Moses positioned center in the frame. The lines created in the composition guide our eye to the upper center third of the frame. We see Moses react before we cut to see what he is reacting to. Three figures occupy the foreground, framing Moses with their bodies. Moses once again appears very small in the frame. One figure moves in front of him, and a match on action brings us tighter on the figure's hands as they struggle to pull rope. The hands move into the right side of the composition, and direct focus brings our attention to Moses' reaction. We return to a long shot where Moses is depicted small in the frame once again compared to the slaves passing by him. A man trips and occupies the right half of the composition. Moses moves towards screen left, and the figure of the handler steps in. The figures in the top of the frame form a triangle where Moses is centered. We cut back to a medium close-up to see Moses' reaction. Once again he tries to move on and ignore what he is seeing. As he turns, there's a slight camera move screen left to make room for another slave to enter the frame. He makes direct eye contact with Moses as he passes, creating an eye line that leads the audience back to him as he turns away again. Ramses enters screen right. We cut back to a medium shot. Moses and Ramses occupy the right half of the frame. The line of the sand mound and the lines of the scaffolding converge on their heads. These lines lead the eye from the bottom left of the frame up to Moses and Ramses, and then back over screen left where more slaves are working. As Ramses pulls Moses screen right and then forward, there is a slight camera move left as Moses is pushed into the center of the shot. We're given a moment to read his emotions before he gets pulled almost completely off screen, occupying the most extreme right third of the frame. His eyeline leads us back up to the top of the scaffolding where a one-sided confrontation is brewing between a handler and a slave. We cut to a long shot of the slave and the handler atop the scaffolding. The slave is very small in the frame, and the handler large and imposing by comparison. The handler is almost large enough to divide the frame, giving the slave very little room to move. As he leans down to yell at him, the camera pans right to reveal Miriam and Aaron. They are set apart from the other slaves by their red clothing, which also match Moses' red belt, suggesting their familial relation. We cut back to Moses, once again occupying the right third of the screen. We are close enough that we can see his reaction while also seeing the escalating situation on the scaffolding. We cut to a more extreme long shot as Ramses and Moses move into their station. The focus of the shot are the rows and rows of slaves making their way down the sand mound. It's really easy to miss Moses and Ramses in the frame as they are so tiny by comparison. Ramses and Moses enter screen left. The lines in the composition lead to the entrance of the temple in the same direction that Ramses is facing. This shot composition emulates Moses' distraction, as our eyes want to follow the lines to the entrance, but were disrupted by Moses' movement as he turns to react to the sound of a whip. We cut back to a long shot of the handler and the slave. They have been repositioned to the upper center of the frame, giving this moment a sense of importance. Cut back to Ramses and Moses. Moses is framed by Ramses in the canopy and positioned center. He is the most important, but he is also the most isolated. The camera trucks in as he reacts to the sound of a whip and Miriam yelling. We cut to a low-angle long shot of Miriam and Aaron. The framing gives them room to move as Miriam tries to take action, and Aaron attempts to stop her. From there we cut to another low-angle shot of the slave and the handler. The handler is the largest and most powerful figure in the frame. The slave is very small, laying down and powerless. We cut to a close-up of Moses' reaction, and he exits screen left. We cut to a wider shot, and the camera pans left as Moses tries to make his way through the slaves to intervene. The camera trucks in to his reaction as we hear the whip crack again. We cut back to the slave, who appears small in the frame, but the lines in the composition lead the eye to him. We cut tighter to him as he is hit, each shot giving us more detail in his face and centering him within the composition, solidifying the growing importance of his suffering. We cut back to a close-up of Moses' face, where he is positioned perfectly center, and we can see him start to react very strongly. From there we go to a long shot of Moses, where he is small and centered in the frame. The camera trucks back a little bit as he approaches, getting larger as his resolve to intervene strengthens. From there we cut to a brief shot of Ramses, a medium close-up, where he finally realizes that something is wrong. The framing allows us to see his confusion. From there we cut back to a low-angle shot of the handler as Moses leaps at him from screen right. Then to a medium shot where the slave is centered as Moses and the handler stumble past him, and we're given a second to see him react. Finally, we come to a low-angle shot as Moses pushes the handler off the scaffolding. There's a slight pan in the camera towards the left throughout these shots, following the action. From there we cut to a low-angle shot from below the scaffolding, where the camera trucks back preceding the handler's descent to the ground below, and stops when he hits. The low angle becomes a perspective shot as the slaves gather around the body, and a handler forces his way into the center of the circle, becoming the largest and most authoritative figure in the shot. We go to an over-the-shoulder shot where we can see a hint of the damage done. The focus is on the body on the ground, and the handler's shoulder is blurred. The camera pans to the right and the focus racks, blurring the background as the handler turns around to demand answers. The tight framing allows us to see his anger. We cut to a medium close-up of the slaves as the camera pans over them, and we eyeline match to a low-angle shot of the top of the scaffolding. All the lines in the composition lead the eye up and towards Moses' tiny figure.